Hi friends, I'm Russ Peterman, the Senior Minister here at University Christian Church, and I am really glad that you're here and that you're committed to joining us on this journey through Lent as we read together the Gospel of Luke. You see, I think there's something really powerful that can happen when a community of faith joins together, committing to read and to study this Bible together in a very intentional way, growing together in our understanding of what it means to follow Jesus. And I'm really excited about this, and I'm looking forward to journeying with you in this way. Now, as you may know, we have basically 4 accounts of the life and ministry of Jesus. We call them Gospels. And 3 of them are very similar. We call them synoptics. They are Matthew and Mark and Luke. The 4th is John. It's a lot different from the other 3. But Luke is unique in that it is part of a 2-volume set known as Luke Acts that make up more than a quarter of the entire New Testament, more than any other writer. We know that these 2 are connected by looking at the opening lines, and it becomes pretty clear pretty quick that they are by the same author. In fact, the entire structure of the 2 books is incredibly similar. Now, we call it Gospel according to Luke, but the truth is we don't really know who wrote it. Neither Luke nor Acts names an author. But according to tradition, it was Luke who was a companion to Paul. Now, if that's true, and not all scholars agree that it is, Luke was an educated man of means, probably a doctor. Now, as we'll discover, one of the things that really sets Luke apart is his interest in the marginalized, the dispossessed, which is why we're calling this the Gospel of Nobodies. We'll be looking at that throughout the season of Lent. Now, Luke's Gospel can be divided into 3 different sections. The first is what we'll be reading this week, which is basically the birth narrative and the early years up to essentially the beginning of his public ministry. And then the second section is his ministry that lasted about 3 years. And then the third section is what's known as the Passion of Jesus, which is essentially the last week of his life and includes his death and resurrection. Now, as you'll see, the author starts by articulating the how and the why of his account. And he acknowledges that there are other accounts out there, but he wanted to provide an orderly account of things that have been fulfilled. And notes that he will consult eyewitnesses, people that were there with Jesus. Now, also in that phrase, an orderly account of the things that have been fulfilled, he speaks to the why, in particular that word fulfilled. Luke wants to connect Jesus to the history of the people of Israel, that his life, that his ministry is a fulfillment of the long covenant story of God in Israel. In fact, God in the whole world. So this week we'll start by looking at the long introduction to the gospel, which begins with the parallel birth stories of John the Baptist and Jesus. Now, John was born of Zechariah and Elizabeth, who was an elderly priestly couple. And then Jesus was born to Mary and Joseph, a young unmarried couple. Both sets of parents, you'll notice, receive a divine promise that they will give birth to a son. And both mothers, upon hearing this news, they begin to sing songs of celebration with echoes from the Old Testament that point to the ancient fulfillment of the promises of God, but also give a preview of each child's role in this sacred story. What we'll learn is that John is a prophetic messenger that prepares Israel to meet God, and that Jesus is the king promised since the rule of David. And then we'll meet Anna and Simeon, who are elderly prophets who have been anxiously awaiting this fulfillment of these divine promises. In Simeon, too, he sings his own song that is inspired by the prophet Isaiah. Again, all of this pointing to the why of the gospel, that Luke is providing for us an orderly account of the things that have been fulfilled. And then the story skips ahead to the only story that we have of Jesus' upbringing, with this interesting story about Jesus in the temple, which once again points him to the fulfillment of the ancient promises. This is who this is. Which then skips forward to Jesus at the age of 30. He is baptized by John, who is preparing for his coming by calling for a new, repentant, recommitted Israel that begins with baptism. And Jesus is set apart as the new leader of this movement, with a voice that comes from God that says, this is the one, listen to him. We then get to read about his origins, tracing his lineage all the way back to David and Abraham and even Adam. Once again, and we'll hear this again, an orderly account of the fulfillment of the ancient promises, pointing back to who Jesus is. And we're then told that Jesus went out into the wilderness where he is tempted by the devil for 40 days. Now, anytime a number is mentioned in the Bible, there's a significance to that number. And 40 is a big number, maybe the biggest number in Scripture. Keep in mind, Noah, it rained for 40 days and 40 nights. The Hebrew people, after being released from bondage and slavery, spent 40 years outside the Promised Land. Moses, 3 times he spent 40 days up on Mount Sinai. There were several mentions of kings that reigned for 40 years. Jonah warned Nineveh that in 40 days that their city would fall. Again, 40 is a big number. Once again, linking him back to the fulfillment of the ancient promises. It's also during this 40 days that he is preparing himself for ministry, where his mission will be fulfilled. 40 is also the length of Lent, not including Sundays, which brings us to us. It's the time for us to prepare ourselves to be the very best version of ourselves so that our lives can be fulfilled in being who and what God created us to be. That we too are fulfillment of the ancient promises of God. Friends, we have so much fun, interesting reading ahead, and I'm so glad that you are part of this process as we journey together to discover who we are as people of faith, even if we're nobodies. This is a Gospel of Nobodies.